so excited to have you join me today for this fun summer cardigan. Of course, today we are working with the Candy Shop hooks from Frills Crochet. As you can see, it's a really fun and colorful line. We will be using the 3.75 millimeter hook for this project, as well as a stitch marker is a great thing to have, a yarn needle to weave in those ends, some scissors, and of course our yarn, which is generously provided to me today from We Crochet. This is the Comfy Fingering Weight yarn. It's 218 yards per 50 grams. I really like this yarn for this project. It's super lightweight and amazing to work with and soft. This is a really soft cotton. I really don't think I can recommend a better yarn for this project. So let's get started. I will be making the size 1X for this video. Like I said, for this video, I will be creating the size 1X. I am using a little bit of a different backdrop than I normally do, simply because we're working with white yarn and I was afraid you wouldn't be able to see the yarn on my lighter backdrops. To get started for the 1X size, we will create a slip knot. And just to know, all the other sizes can be found in the pattern. Now for the size 1X, I will be chaining a total of 115 stitches. Now that I have 115 stitches, I am going to start by single crocheting in the very second chain from the hook and across. If you prefer, this can be worked in a foundation single crochet row of 114 stitches. So at the end of this row, you will have 114 stitches. And notice when I do work my way back across the chains, I like to work in that bottom hump versus the other loops. That way, when I'm done with this row, the top of my work still has that nice V shape. So work the single crochets across for 114 stitches. Now for row 2, I'm going to turn, and I like to substitute any chains at the beginning of this next row. We'll be working double crochet stitches, but I don't like to chain. I like to do what's called a stacked single. I find it gives a flatter edge and is really nice. So let me zoom in here. To do a stacked single crochet, we are simply going to insert our hook into the very first stitch of this row. So we're not chaining. We're going to yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through both of those loops on the hook, and now we'll insert our hook back into this left bar. So we're going into the left bar of what we just completed, yarning over and pulling up a loop, yarning over and pulling through the loop. And this completes the stacked single crochet, and that is our first stitch in the row. So it is very smart to mark this stitch, otherwise it can be hard to figure out which is the last stitch in your row when you're working the next row. I always like to mark the first stitch in my row when I'm working with that stacked single crochet. Then we are going to do a double crochet into the next stitch. And now here comes our repeat for the rest of this row. We are going to chain one, skip one, double crochet, and that's our repeat to work across. So we will chain one, skip one, double crochet in the next. So repeat the chain one, skip one, double crochet all the way across row 2. For row 3, I have turned and I will do a stacked single crochet into the first stitch again, and this will count as the first stitch in the row as our first double crochet. And I'm definitely marking these beginning stitches of each row because it is so easy to lose track of our stitches if they are not marked. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that very first stitch. And now into the next stitch, which is this chain space, I'm going to double crochet 2. And here comes our repeat for this row. Do a double crochet into the next stitch and 2 double crochets into the next, which is the chain space, so I tend to just work into the chain space for those increases. So we will repeat that all the way across. double crochet into the next stitch, and then 2 double crochet into the next. At the end of this row, you will have 171 stitches. So just simply keep repeating that all the way across. Do a double crochet and then 2 double crochets into the next stitch. So as I get to the end of row 3, I will simply remove my stitch marker and do 2 double crochets into that last stitch. And that completes row 3. If we notice, this is starting to take shape. It's no longer a line of crochet stitches. It's started to take shape to a circle, which is what we want for a yoke. Now we are going to turn and do row 4. For row 4, we are going to do our first stitch as a stacked single crochet, and that does count as the first stitch in the row, and we should absolutely take a stitch marker and mark that stitch. Now our next stitch in this row is going to be a bobble. This is where we yarn over, insert our hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop. I like to pull these up a little bit so they're almost the height of the stitch we're working. Yarn over and pull through 2. And then we're going to repeat that 4 more times. Yarning over, inserting and pulling up a loop, yarning over and pulling through 2. We'll do this until there are 5 loops on our hook. Or 6 loops, sorry about that. There are 6 loops on our hook. To complete the bobble stitch, we will yarn over and pull through all 6 loops on the hook. I like to push this towards the right side of my work because we are currently on a wrong side row, and that way it pops out on this other side. Then we will double crochet into the next 5 stitches. And that is our little repeat going on here. We're going to be doing a bobble stitch and then 5 double crochets. And now we will just keep repeating that until we get to the last 2 stitches in the row. Now that I have worked my repeat of doing the bobble and then 5 double crochets, I'm at my last 2 stitches. So I'm going to do one more bobble, and then I'm simply going to remove my stitch marker and do the double crochet into the last stitch. And that completes row 4. Now the bobbles did cause our row currently to do a little bit of almost ruffling, but it will block out quite well. Now for row 5, we will be increasing again. To do the increasing for this row, we are going to start with doing a stacked single crochet for our first stitch and mark it. And now we are going to increase in that first stitch again. So do a double crochet in the same as the stacked single crochet. And now we are going to simply double crochet into the next 2 stitches. and that will be our repeat. We will do 2 double crochets into the next, and then we will double crochet into the next 2 stitches. We're going to repeat that all the way across, doing 2 double crochets into the next stitch and then double crochet in the next 2 stitches. At the end of row 5 for size 1X, your stitch count will be 228 stitches. So after row 5, we are going to be doing rows 6, 7, and 8, not increasing. It will also be a repeat of row 2. So that's the one thing I like about this cardigan, is it's not a difficult pattern in terms of the stitch repeats. So for row 6, I will turn and do a stacked single crochet into that very first stitch and mark it. And then I will do a double crochet into the next stitch, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet, and that is my repeat across. It's to chain 1, skip 1, double crochet. So this is a repeat of row 2. We will do the exact same thing for row 7 and row 8. So we'll have 3 rows that are repeating row 2. But when you start doing row 7, when you work your double crochet, you'll be working it into the chain space. What it does is it creates a really cool fabric texture like this. So we're doing this space right here. We're doing 3 rows in between our bobble rows, and that is what is repeating row 2. So without increasing, repeat row 2 for the next 3 rows. So now that we have finished rows 6 through 8, we've got this beautiful design going on. I'm really digging it. I hope you are too. And we still do have a little bit of puckering going on that bobble row and all those increases, but as we block, this will block out quite nicely. Now for row 9. For row 9, we of course will start the first stitch of the row as a stacked single crochet. And I'm going to go ahead and move a stitch marker to that very first stitch. Now I'm going to double crochet into the next 2 stitches. And there are our first 3 stitches in the row. Our next stitch will have 2 double crochets in it. So we're going to do 2 double crochet, and then we are going to double crochet into the next 3 stitches. So this once again is an increasing row, just like we have done before. We're just continuing to do a bit of increasing, and that is our repeat across. So double crochet into the next 3. And then 2 double crochet, and repeat that all the way across. Now that we've worked our increase row, it's time for us to do a bobble row again. And so for the size 1X, we will be starting with a stacked single crochet into the first stitch. And marking it. And now we will be doing a bobble stitch in the next stitch. and then we are going to double crochet into the next 5 stitches. So this is similar to what we did before. Do a bobble stitch and then double crochet into the next 5 stitches, and we will repeat that all the way across until we get to the last 2 stitches. In the last 2 stitches left, we will do another bobble stitch and then double crochet into the last stitch and turn. And then for row 11, it's very similar to all the other increased rows we've done, but I'm just going to tell you so I don't have to keep coming back for every single row. But for row 11, you will do the stacked single crochet into the first stitch and then double crochet into the same stitch. So this is very similar as row 5. And then you will double crochet into the next 4. And a repeat will be 2 double crochet into the next, double crochet 4, and you'll repeat that all the way across. So at the end of row 11, you will have 342 stitches. At the end of row 9, we had 285 stitches. So right now you have 285 stitches. You'll do row 10 with the bobbles. Row 11, you'll increase on every 5th stitch. So you'll do 2 double crochet and then double crochet 4, and you'll end with 342 stitches. After that, for row 12 through 14, we are simply repeating row 2. So go ahead and do those repeats through row 14 and then come on back. So here we are back at row 15. For the size 1X, this will be our last increasing row for the yoke. This increasing row is done a bit different than the rest, where the rest we kind of had the same repeat of increasing all the way around. In order to increase evenly all the way around, but we're doing a different amount of stitches for this last increasing row to make sure it's as many stitches as we need, we will be doing it a little bit differently. So I'm going to walk you through row 15. We will start by doing a stacked single crochet and marking it. And now we will double crochet into the next 2 stitches. And now we will be doing a 2 double crochet into the next. And then we will double crochet 6. We will do the 2 double crochet and the double crochet 6 for a total of 21 times. So do 2 double crochet 6, 21 times. Now that I've done that repeat of 2 double crochets into the next stitch and double crochet 6 21 times, which I highly recommend using. I found a lot of free counter apps on like a phone, so every single time I would do that repeat, I would just tap my phone, and that's an easier way to keep track of how many times I've done that repeat. Our next repeat will be to do a 2 double crochet. So I'm actually going to reset my counter over here. The next repeat will be to do a 2 double crochet into the next stitch and then double crochet into the next 5. And we will do that for a total of 7 times. So 2 double crochet into the next, double crochet 5 for a total of 7 times. And now that I've done a 2 double crochet next, double crochet in the next 5 stitches, I'm going to reset my row counter here, and we will go back to doing another repeat of 2 double crochet into the next stitch, and then double crochet 6, and we will do that for 21 times again. So we'll be doing 2 double crochet into the next stitch, and then in the next 6 we just double crochet, and do that for 21 repeats. So now that we've completed this row, this is our last increasing row for the yoke. It's a great time to double check your stitches, your stitch count. So for this row, we should have a total of 392 stitches for the 1X size. I know it's a lot of stitches to count, but it's better to find out now if you're off than going back a few rows from now. So go ahead and count. For row 15, you should have a total of 392 stitches. Now for row 16, I've turned and I'm going to do a stack single crochet into the very first stitch and mark it. And then I will double crochet into the next stitch. And then I'm going to do a bobble. And this will begin our repeat, this bobble stitch. We will be doing a bobble stitch and then double crocheting 5 for the remaining stitches across. So simply continue to do that repeat. So bobble stitch, double crochet 5, and that will be our repeat all the way across. We won't be changing the numbers of our stitch counts or anything, so that will remain the same, but we're just doing a bobble stitch and double crochet the next 5 for the remaining stitches across. Welcome back. As you can see, I've done a few more rows past the bobble row, so I'm just going to tell you about those rows. I didn't do them on camera because they're simply repeats, and I was really enjoying my show and I knew I could keep going. So after the bobble row, which we did not do any increasing, is 1 solid row of double crochet without increasing. So we still have 392 stitches. Then we will do 5 rows repeating row 2. That will also not increase. We still have 392 stitches when we get to 22 rows total for the size 1X. So we are at 22 rows, and it is time for us to split for the arms and the sleeves. So let's do that. I'm going to start just how we started each row with a stacked single crochet. Go ahead and place that stitch marker so we don't lose that spot. And now I will do a double crochet into the very next stitch. And now we will have our repeat that we've been doing. So this is the same as row 2, where we chain 1, skip 1, double crochet into that chain space, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet. So that is what we will be working across. This part will be the first left front. This will be your front left panel, but the first part of this. For other sizes, you might be working on the wrong side of the work. That's fine. It would be working the right side panel first. So what we will do is we will work the chain 1, skip 1, double crochet for a total of 58 stitches from the starting edge, so including the stitch we marked. So continue working your chain 1, skip 1, double crochet until you have a total of 58 stitches from this starting edge. Now that we have 58 stitches worked from our starting edge, it is time for us to work the underarm chains and skip the arm stitches. So I will chain 8, and now we are going to be skipping 80 stitches for the arm. I like to grab my stitch marker and count the 80 stitches and mark them. Now I have my stitch marker marking the 80th stitch for these underarm stitches, and for the arm stitches, and I have 8 chained for my underarm. Now I will start working across the back by skipping these arm stitches. So we're going to completely ignore those arm stitches for now. They're just going to be an opening. And I will start that repeat again across the back. However, when I start my repeat, we start with a chain one. So this chain one is the first stitch in our repeat. And then I'm going to skip this double crochet and double crochet into the next chained space, into that next stitch. So this is where I want you to go ahead and move your stitch marker. That way you don't lose track of what stitch you're counting from for this next part, because we are counting from this chain, that chain one. So this chain one, skip one, double crochet are the first two stitches in this back part, and I've marked that chain one as my first stitch. And now I'll simply continue on by doing a chain one, skip one, double crochet, keep doing that repeat for a total of 116 stitches, which is why it's important to have a stitch marker around to make these type of things a little bit easier, because I'm going to be counting 116 stitches starting from this chain one. Now that I have worked 116 stitches from this stitch marker, I can go ahead and take this stitch marker for the next section, just like we did before with the last arm. So now we will be repeating those arm steps again, where we chain 8 for the underarm. And then we're going to skip 80, so I'm going to count 80 stitches and then mark it. And then just as we did before, we will skip these 80 stitches and start that repeat again with a chain one, skip one. So I've got my marked stitch for the 80th stitch. I'll skip that next stitch and double crochet. And once again, we'll move our stitch marker up to that chain one, because that's the very first stitch in this next segment we're going to count. So we want to make sure that we mark that chain one stitch, since it's the first stitch of this front panel. And we will do, so we've done chain one, skip one, double crochet. We've got our first two stitches. We're going to continue on to the very end. But you do kind of want to make sure that you've got your stitches just so you don't run into trouble later. So we will be working 58 stitches from the stitch marker to the end. All right, so we can go ahead and remove that stitch marker since we know we have 58 from here to the end. And now we are ready to work our body. So we've completed our row where we have split for the arms and the body. So we've got our sleeves here. These will be the openings for the sleeves. And then the remaining stitches across are the body stitches, which is what we will continue working on next. So let's turn our work and get ready for our first row of our body. So to work the body, we will be repeating row 2. So to start that, we will do our first stitch as a stacked single crochet and mark it. Then we will continue with that repeat where we will double crochet into the next. So just like row 2, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet. Chain 1, skip 1, double crochet. We'll be doing that all the way across, and I'll show you what we do when we get to those chain stitches for the underarm portion. All right, so when you come to the chains, we're just going to work them like we would any other stitch, where we chain 1, skip 1, and then we will double crochet into that chain, because that's one of our stitches. Chain 1, skip the next chain, do a double crochet into the next.
And the underarm chains, since they're an even stitch count, they will work out. It's not going to be any hiccup. You're just going to keep on going with the chain one, skip one, double crochet. So that's what it will look like when you work underneath the arm. So you just continue working row 2 for the body, working row after row, repeating row 2. And you will do this for a total of 26 rows or until the length that you like. The nice thing about working something in a top-down raglan style is that you can try it on as you go. So you can always put your arms in those arm opening spots and see how you like the length as you go. So let me fold this so we can see what shape it's starting to take. I'm actually going to flip it here so we can see the right side. So what we have done, once you fold it this way, you can kind of see a bit better where this is headed, is when we split for the arms and the sleeves. So we've got our front opening here. This section from this to here will work down the body and our arms remain open. So the rows will be working back and forth. We'll be building down here for the body, and then we will come back after that and do the arms. But we're going to finish out this body section first, so keep repeating row 2 for a total of 26 rows or until it's the length that you like, and then come on back. Now it's time to do a single crochet along this front edge. I've got my bobble side facing me, so the right side facing. If you need to fasten off your yarn and rejoin to join on the right side facing at this bottom right, please do so. And I've placed my buttons on here just so I can see where they're going to be. I'm placing these small buttons about 1 every 6th row. And I like the way that looks and it works out. And I think it's really smart to place your buttons right now, just set them where they're about going to go so that you can get an idea of what it will look like, because my bottom button, I'm actually starting on the 2nd row from the bottom. Now to do our buttonholes, what we will be doing is we're going to chain on the edge, so join or chain 1. And now we're going to be single crocheting along this front edge with the right side facing. Now when we get to a spot where we want to make a buttonhole, we're going to chain 2, skip this edge, the edge of that row, and then single crochet 2 along the next edge row. So we're single crocheting about 2 stitches per row along this edge, and then we're skipping by chaining 2 and skipping that row wherever we want a buttonhole. So I'm doing that at about every 6th row. So I'll chain 2, skip 2, and then continue to repeat that all the way along the front side of the cardigan. Now just remember, this isn't the side our buttons will be attached to. We're making holes so our buttons will attach to the other side and our button will slide through these holes so that we can close. Now as I get to the top, I'll simply do a single crochet to finish off that top edge, and then I'm just going to fasten off my yarn and weave in the end. And now it's time for us to work on the other side. This is the side that we will sew our buttonholes to, and we definitely need to make a little bit more space for us to sew our buttonholes. So we're going to be starting with the right side facing us, but this time we're going to be working from the top down so that our single crochet stitches will be facing us. So I'm going to join at the top right corner. I've kind of got this upside down because of the way I'm going to be working it. And I'm going to join my yarn, chain 1, and now I'm simply going to single crochet 2 stitches along every single double crochet edge all the way down this side. Now because my buttonholes are so small, I'm not able to fit a needle and this fingering weight yarn through them, so I'm going to be using just some sewing thread and a smaller needle in order to place these buttons on. Now what you want to do is you want to match up your sides. We know where our holes are, and so we want to make sure that our button is sewn on to this right side of it at the same area where it will slip through that hole. So you're just going to be matching up the rows where you have the holes for your buttons and then stitching your buttons onto your cardigan. Now we're going to be working on the sleeve. I did a nice picot edge along the bottom, and we don't have to do very many rows. Now if you want more or less rows for your sleeve, feel free to add them or just omit some. So let's get started. This is what it's going to look like, and I'm going to show you on the other side. To do the sleeve, we're first going to find our sleeve opening, and we're going to come to the bottom here and attach our yarn to a chain space in the center underneath the arm. That will make it a less conspicuous seam. Now we're going to do a stacked single crochet to start our first stitch, and feel free to mark this if needed. And now we're just going to work in pattern around here. So we're going to be working the same pattern as we did up here. We're just simply going to be doing it around the opening. So I will chain one, skip one, and double crochet into the next chain space. On these corners, so here's a corner, we'll simply chain one, skip this area, and double crochet into the next. It will help it doesn't make too big of a gap, and it helps it stay looking consistent. So we'll just keep working those double crochets, chain one, skip one, double crochet all the way around, and then we will join. Now that I'm back to the beginning, I will do a slip stitch to join, and then I'm going to turn. And especially with turning, this is where I love using stitch markers. Now for the next 5 rows, we're simply going to be repeating that row where we're just doing our stitch pattern of double crochet, chain one, skip one, double crochet all the way around. So do that for the next 5 rounds and then come on back. And now that I come to the last chain space, I do one more chain to keep my repeats even, and then I remove my stitch marker from the first stitch in the round, and I will slip stitch to join. Now for the edging, because this is round 6 for me, I am ready to do that edging. For the edging, we will not be turning. We're just simply going to be working this edge with the right side facing. Now for this edge, we're going to chain one because we're working in single crochets for this edge now. We are going to single crochet in 4 stitches. And now we're going to do a little picot, which is a chain 3. You're going to slip stitch into the first chain, and that completes it. It just creates a cute little knot on there. And now we'll continue with single crocheting in the next 4. We're not skipping any stitches when we do that little picot thing there. We are simply just doing it and then continuing to crochet into the next 4 stitches. And then once again, we will chain 3, slip stitch into the first chain, and then continue to single crochet into the next 4. So we will do that all the way around and then join. Now as you make your way back around to your first stitch in the round, you might notice for some of the sizes that you are 2 stitches shy of doing your next picot. In that case, where it's underneath the arm, you can either just have a stretch without or add a little bit of extra, one more extra picot in there so that it looks a little bit even. and then join to the first stitch in the round. I like to do an invisible join where I fasten off and join with my needle. And there we have it. Go ahead and weave in all of your ends. I highly recommend blocking every single time. I block almost all of the things that I create. It adds that finishing touch. And I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you enjoy it wearing this flowy cardigan during the spring and summer months. And come on back soon. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next patterns. And I can't wait to see you for our next project.